Welcome to King Lizard's Game Lounge and Forza Motorsport 7 on Xbox One. I put this video together basically because a number of my viewers have asked me how I tune vehicles. So I thought I'd put together this video to explain what I do for my generic configuration and also explain a little bit more about my way of tuning, if you like. When I tune a vehicle, I'm tuning something that is good all round. I'm not tuning something that's specifically crazy fast or, specifically amazing grip or whatever. I'm trying to get the best balance possible out of the vehicle so I get a bit of an all-round experience. This particular vehicle is the Nissan Black GTR Forza Edition vehicle. It's S-Class vehicle standard, and the Rivals event I just raced, which is at Suzuka's West Alternate Circuit, is quite a mix of high speed, slow and fast technical corners. So it's quite a challenging circuit, so I need pretty good tune here. I want something that's quick off the launch to get me in and out of corners. I want something that's very grippy and doesn't, kind of kick out on me when I'm trying to accelerate away. And I want something that can hold corners at high speed. This vehicle, to be honest, is not something I particularly enjoyed driving in Forza Motorsport 7. I actually find this quite a tough vehicle to drive. So this is the first time I'm chucking on my generic tune set. In this case, I discovered after running the event in S785 that on the leaderboards there's lots of people driving P-Class vehicles. So as a result, it means, it's pretty much open season on this vehicle now. I can pretty much add anything I want to it. I've got no restrictions. I can take it up to the highest level of P-Class that I possibly can, and that in itself won't give me any restrictions. However, a lot of the time in Forza Motorsport 7, when you're tuning a vehicle, you won't have open season on the vehicle. You'll be very limited as to what you can do. And my suggestion to you is that if you want to change the handling of the vehicle and make it better, the only way to do that is to make sure that you have at minimum a race suspension and a race transmission. They will allow you to make the most changes to your vehicle when you're tuning. Now, unfortunately, some classes won't allow you to do that. However, in this case, I'm not restricted in any shape or form, so I can show you what I'm going to do to this vehicle with that race suspension and transmission. Now, what I'm doing here is obviously adding all the aspiration parts, the air filters, as much as possible that I can in order to increase the class rating of this vehicle and give me a high powered beast, if you like. Obviously, doing this doesn't always mean a good vehicle. It actually can mean quite a horrible vehicle that's very difficult to drive and control. Obviously, by adding those race suspension and transmissions, I can actually modify this vehicle to change its behavior and counter this power that I'm adding to it. So in a few seconds I'll jump into the tune part of the configuration, and I can go into a bit more detail about what I do, why I do it. So first up is PSI. Typically I'll set 29 PSI, maybe as low as 28. If it's an oval, you want 30 PSI or higher. Anything else around 28, 29. For the gear ratios, I'm not going to drop any gears here. I want to keep all 6 gears, because the more gears there are, the easier it's going to be able to maneuver this car around the track fast. For the camber, front and rear, 1.5 and then 1.2 on the rear, or slightly low on the rear. No toe in or out on the front or rear, and a front caster of 5.0, so standard. Next up, anti-roll bars. I always take the base value that's given to me on the front and then minus 4 or 5 from the value for the rear. That always gives me a good enough balance. Sometimes I might even go a little bit lower depending on the car, or a little bit higher, but this is my generic setting. For the springs on the front, I'll always have 50 value more on the front in pounds than I will on the rear. I'll typically take the base value on the front and then change the value on the rear to match up to 50 difference. In terms of ride height, you do not want the ride height any lower than 4. Any lower than 4 gives you a pretty scary handling vehicle from my experience. I typically will try to go mid-range if it's something that's very low to the ground, like this GTR Nissan Black Edition. Obviously, if it's something that's a little bit more higher than normal, then I'll lower it as much as possible, because obviously there's going to be bandwidth to do that. But in this case, this is an extremely low vehicle anyway, so I've kind of gone for the mid ground, 4.4 as an average, if you like, middle of the road. This should be low enough for this vehicle and do what I want it to do and remain quite grippy. And then finally, I'll make a change to the springs front and rear. In this case, actually, I'm going to bring the front closer to the rear in order to get that 50 difference, because that's quite high spring value at 800 plus there. And then next up, we've got the rebound stiffness. Now, in the past, I used to set this at 9 or 10. I've actually found that it seems to be a bit more stable across the board at 11. And that's something that my nephew was using, and he kind of shared with me, and I actually found that is a much more stable value for the rebound stiffness. And on the bump stiffness, he was also taking his down to 1.5. I was always normally having mine around 4.5-ish, so, but again, I found this value to be better, so that's actually thanks to my nephew there. The downforce front and rear. Front, you want 100 pounds just to get the best overall kind of downforce on the vehicle to keep it on track, and on the rear you want 200. If you have too much, you can land up not being able to turn very easily, so don't go too crazy with the downforce, especially on the rear. But I found this to be quite a good balance, the 100 versus 200. You don't want too much on the front, because obviously it's going to slow you down quite considerably, and at the same time you don't want a massive amount on the rear, because again that will also cost you a lot of speed. However, you want enough to be able to keep that rear end down. Now, in order to set the downforce, you will of course need adjustable parts fitted, and again, depending on the class of vehicle you're tuning, that may not always be an option. I personally would avoid putting on spoilers anything lower than B class. I typically will only spoiler A class vehicles and above. From a brake balance force perspective, it's pretty much user's choice. I personally leave these at default. From a differential perspective, I will always fit a diff, and I use the diff for a number of reasons. Sometimes you can use the diff to manage the handling and the launch of the vehicle. However, my generic tune will always start out with 100% acceleration front and rear, obviously depending on the drive type, and a deceleration of 0 front and rear, again depending on the drive type. That I find allows me to get in and out of those corners really quickly. Well, I hope you found this useful in terms of tuning tips, or at least in terms of understanding how I do my tuning. All of this is pretty much my own tuning configs, apart from that little section that I kind of acquired from my nephew, which I actually found helped my tunes quite considerably. So I hope you guys have found this useful. If you enjoyed the video, please be kind enough to click that like button and sub to the channel if you're not already a subscriber to King Liz's Game Lounge. Check out the video for this Rivals event. You'll see how well this performs up against the clock, and hopefully it's going to be a good one. Special thanks to those viewers that inspired me to make this video. I hope you guys have enjoyed it. Take care, keep well, keep watching, and most importantly, come back soon.